How's everybody doing this morning?
Great.
Good to hear. So it's a pretty funny world that we live in right now, as you can all imagine and you can all attest to. It's so funny that when I looked at the news this morning, the headline that I saw was National Park Service recommends visitors stop licking toads. So if you didn't think things were weird enough already, there you go. All right, so first thing we'd like to do is thank our sponsors for being here. So without the sponsors, we wouldn't have coffee, seats, streaming, speakers, anything. So first thing we want to do is thank them. So Mike from La Pata Flegal had to head off to help a company sell their business this morning. So was anybody else here from La Pata this morning, if you could raise your hand? All right, no worries. And then anyone from Parkside? Dave, did you? Nope, Dave wasn't able to make it. He had another conflict that he was wondering about. Lauren from Atomic, I just saw you in a moment ago. If you could raise your hand. Thank you, Lauren. We've got Jason from Swift Systems over here running the video and the live stream. So there is a LinkedIn live stream running right now. And we also have a video that we'll be posting up to the website, the MML website, as we go. Tom from Black Twig had to put a proposal out to a client this morning. Anybody else here from Black Twig this morning? No worries. Okay, and then Jamie from CMA right here up in front. Thanks, Jamie. And I believe Paul from Pulcinelli also had another business transaction, so Paul wasn't able to make it this morning. But if we could have a round of applause, please, for those sponsors. There is a table in the front with some information about the sponsors. If you could stop by, there's some good stuff up there that I think you'll enjoy. Okay, we've got a great speaker this morning. Rodney's in the back of the room here. Rodney Mueller is an entrepreneur, advisor, and mentor that has reinvented the antiquated way of setting and achieving goals. His mentorship and advisory of startup and mid-sized CEOs has led to exponential growth through his Perfect AIM method. A high-performance leadership advisor, Rodney believes that humans are the greatest untapped asset in any culture. His proprietary method teaches leaders how to grow into exceptional human beings, grow their companies at record rates, create a culture of visionary employees, and obtain deep fulfillment and meaning in their lives. A former drill sergeant, Rodney has served in the U.S. Army Reserves for the last 23 years. If we could have a round of applause for that, please. What a perfect fit for Veterans Day. And became one of the youngest to attain E6 Staff Sergeant. He was assigned to the world's first Joint Biological Point Detection Unit, the only one of its kind in the world, and has most recently served at U.S. Africa and U.S. European Command in Stuttgart, Germany. In 2017, Rodney kicked off the Absent Father podcast after being featured on Oprah's Life Class 2013 about fatherless sons and having the desire to help others overcome the impact of growing up with an absent father. Rodney believes in and derives the most meaning in his life from being a father and a husband. He considers St. Louis home and loves traveling with his wife, 2 daughters, and 2 dogs, Porter and Bruno. And I think this is really cool, in their vintage Airstream. So if we could, let's please welcome Rodney Mueller.
Well, welcome. Thank you. It's an honor to be here, particularly on Veterans Day, because I get to share a little bit of the great knowledge and wisdom that I got from my time in the military and how that relates to business and business strategy. As I was preparing for this, of course, I got to watch another fellow veteran who was here in September, Cujo, who is absolutely fantastic. If I didn't have some anxiety about my presentation, I definitely did after seeing him speak. He's extraordinary. And he has what would be my dream job, to be a fighter pilot. But what Cujo talked about that was so special was this team of teams, and it's really true. We think about the fighter pilot and the hero, but we don't think about all that goes behind that. And while he illustrated the importance of that, I hope today that I can share with you how do we actually catalyze the people energy in our organizations and do what he said. How do we enliven our team? So before I jump in here, I wanted to just get a sense of who is in the room, and I'd love to know how many of you are a business owner, if you could raise your hand for me. All right, and please keep it up if you've been in business at least a year. Business owner or business leader. You're running businesses. Thank you. So, and how many of you have been in business at least 2 years? 5. 10 years. Very impressive. 20 years? Very impressive. 30 years. 40. Holy cow. Holy cow. Well, congratulations. And being a business owner, working with tons of business owners, I know how hard it is. And I know that we all share one thing in common if you've been anywhere remotely close to running a business. It's that on a day or two of your life, you have looked something like this picture. Maybe you did just this morning. You've been angry, exasperated, and most specifically frustrated. Anybody identify with being frustrated at one point or another in your business? So I'd love to hear from y'all. There's a lot of business experience in the room. What are some of the top frustrations that you find in your business? Just shout it out to me. People. Amen. I knew that was going to be one of the first. Anything specific about people? Are you talking about the current landscape of the labor force or anything else? Personalities, awesome. What else?
Alignment.
What?
Alignment.
Alignment. Okay. Alignment amongst the people?
Yeah. Vision.
Absolutely. All right. Wearing too many hats? So not enough time, perhaps? Yeah. All right, what else? One more.
Client demands.
Client demands. Yeah, clients are a pain.
They
They really are. All right. So one of the great privileges that I've had, both running a business, but also being a business advisor, a mentor for the last 12 years, is that I've been in and out of a lot of those conversations that we had on last night. I've been with them when they're in that moment. And so I've got to see a lot of the frustrations that business owners, business leaders run into. And what's amazing is that we all pretty much have the same ones. And so just wanted to cover a few of these. You probably recognize some of these, but first one on that list is control. So there's not a business owner I have ever met that got into business because they really wanted a boss. Because they wanted someone or something to tell them what to do, when to do, and how to do it. And what so often happens though is we get into our business, we're running, it's fine, it's very exciting, but then the business starts to control us rather than us control the business. And so we don't have the time, we don't have the autonomy that we got into it in the first place for. Anybody feel me on that one? Yeah. Second one is profit. Very simply, there's just not enough profit or cash flow. Even when you feel like your business is getting to that next level, something comes up. You got to cover inventory. You got lagging accounts receivable. Just feels like there's not quite enough to get to that next level. Third, and these are not in a particular order, people. You mentioned some of the issues already, but you're frustrated with your people. It seems like they all have their own agenda and priority, whether that's your leadership team or your employees or your vendors or those annoying clients that always want more or don't understand what you're about, right? Fourth is what we call hitting the ceiling. You might notice some of this language. This is a slide from EOS, which we're going to talk about in a second. But hitting the ceiling, it's bouncing up against that growth ceiling. Growth is stopped. You're trying some things, but you don't know what to do next to get it to that next level. And then lastly, once you've encountered all these things, and you're like, I'm going to do something about it. You tried the next social media strategy, the next marketing strategy, the new thing in your industry, but nothing's working. So, has anybody I know that you've experienced this, but can you identify with some of these frustrations? And especially now more than ever in light of the fears around the recession, the changing landscape in the job market, some of these frustrations are likely hitting a little closer to home than normal. So what I want you to consider is, in order to break through these frustrations, and we don't have to have a business just living in this land of frustration, although I know you have seen people, I'm sure not you, that have been living this way in your business for a long time. But in order to do it, there are two things that we absolutely have to have. We have to have the right strategy and the right execution. One or the other is not sufficient. Now, most of what we're going to talk about today is about right strategy. And one of my favorite case studies and one of my favorite companies is a company that's probably impacted everybody in this room, which is Apple Computer. So most of you know their story of success and how they've made a massive impact. But what you might not know, starting with the origin of the company, founded in the late 70s by, of course, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. By 1983, one of the fastest growing computer companies, with the launch of the Macintosh and the first computer to have a graphic user interface that made computers pretty. And by 1983, Steve Jobs had come to believe that the company had outgrown his leadership, which is very counter to his classic stereotype, but he needed a professional CEO. So he goes and hires a man, handpicked, by the name of John Scully, a business executive from Pepsi. And John Scully's strategy that he brought into Apple was all about profit maximization, business efficiencies, and revenue growth. And important part to the story, this handpicking of the CEO didn't work out too well for Steve Jobs because he was ousted from Apple a few years later. So John Scully runs Apple from 1983 to 1993, and by most accounts was a successful CEO in the sense that he grew Apple's revenues from $569 million in 1983 to over $8.3 billion in 1993. That's pretty good, right? Scully steps down because it wasn't doing so well. I think he had the foresight to get off the bus while it was good. And new CEO Gil Amelio comes in, and Apple is really starting to scuffle from 1993 to 1997. How could this be? We're on the verge of a technological revolution. They are one of the fastest growing computer companies, and yet by 1997, they were 90 days from bankruptcy and reported the worst financial quarter ever in their history. Gil Amelio, the CEO at the time, steps down, and Steve Jobs is finally back as the interim CEO at Apple. And so what he knew, and what I hope to share today, is that there's a really important element of having the right strategy. And there's a lot of ways that we think about traditional goal setting. It's easy for us to think about revenue growth and profit maximization, but if you don't have the heart of why that business exists, then we might be off target. And so Steve Jobs goes to work with a new strategy that he shares with the public called Think Different, but it's also an orientation of way that the company is going to be managed from now on and what's most important. So he does some things kind of behind the scenes. He shifts the operating system that the Macintosh runs on. That makes a huge change. And by 2001 launches the iPhone. The iPod. Can you believe that was only 2001, the iPod? 2003 launches iTunes. 2007 launches the iPhone. And by 2011, Apple, a company that was on the verge of bankruptcy, stock in the toilet, the worst financial quarter ever in 97. By 2011, they surpass ExxonMobil and become the world's most valuable company, which is where they sit today. So that is both the power and the peril of having the right strategy and the right execution. You really got to have both. So most of what we're going to talk about today is about how do we get the right strategy, and I hope to share something that shifts the way that you think about this from now on. But I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't at least tell you and share, and I know some of you are familiar with this model, but the best model that I have found, the best framework that I've found that helps small and medium-sized businesses achieve right strategy and right execution is a model called the Entrepreneurial Operating System, or EOS for short. And ultimately what EOS is about is helping businesses achieve three things: vision, traction, and health. Vision from the standpoint of getting 100% of your team on the same page with where you're going and how you're going. Alignment, to whoever said that earlier. Traction, which is about that execution. It's about having your entire organization executing with discipline, focus, and clarity on that vision on a weekly and quarterly basis. And lastly, health. So creating a culture that is open, honest, healthy, and fun-loving, because A, that's a much better place to work at, but also it's a way more effective leadership team. So I'm just going to cover how we do that real quick, and then we're going to dive into how do we get right strategy and what most of today is about, all right? Does that sound good? All right, I know it's 8 a.m. I had to wake up at like 4:30 so I could be alive for this presentation today. So there's, the way that EOS works is we strengthen the 6 key components of your business, all right? And so the 6 key components, every business has these components, and what implementing the entrepreneurial operating system is about is strengthening these key components. So we're going to talk more in depth about vision, but essentially having a clear vision that everybody in your organization knows where you're going and how you're going to get there. The second key component is people. Check me if I'm wrong here, Bruce. Bruce is also an EOS implementer in the front here. Second key component is people. And very simply, you cannot achieve a great vision without great people, as annoying as they are. So the people component is really about how do we get the right people that fit our culture, fit the type of things that we want to see out of our culture, into the right seats, meaning that they have the capability to do that job well, and that's up and down the organization. Third key component is data. Data is about running our business on objective information and facts, rather than subjective information, egos, and feelings that so often drive entrepreneurial decision making. Am I right? Yeah. All right, so when you strengthen these key components, vision, people, and data, the imperfections and impurities in your business are going to become crystal clear. So that leads us to the fourth key component, which is issues. And you know, when I think about this issues component, I ultimately think this is what entrepreneurship is really about. It's really getting good at solving the challenges and problems in your business. That is how you stay in business. I imagine the person that's been in business for 40 years, they've been really good at solving a lot of issues. So this is about how do we get good at solving them at the root and making them go away forever, rather than endlessly discussing the issues and never taking action. Fifth key component is process. Every business has a handful of core processes. It's about how do we get them done the right and best way every time, which leads to better profitability and ultimately making your business more fun and easy to manage. And last, traction. This is about driving execution. I know I was meeting someone in here earlier, they're doing level 10 meetings. It's about driving that weekly accountability, focus, and discipline that drives realizing your vision. So that is the EOS model. That's ultimately about how do we get right strategy and right execution. But today, what I really want to focus on is this right strategy piece. And ultimately, what we're talking about is vision, but there's all these business terms that go around. What I want to really boil it down to, when we think about business strategy or we think about vision, what we're really talking about is how do we set goals? How do we set goals? And what I want you to consider is that pretty much all the way that we have been taught to think about goals and goal setting, the way that John Scully brought into Apple, is risky. And there's two important risks that come up when we think about traditional goal setting. And I'm gonna explain more what I mean by traditional goal setting, but consider it's the way that we've all been taught to think about goals, the way that we've all been taught to think about setting targets and results. And the two big risks are wrong target and wrong focus. So John Scully is a classic example of this. He was focused on revenue growth, profit maximization, and business efficiencies, and he won at the game he was playing, but ultimately had the wrong target, and that had the whole organization focused on the wrong thing. They weren't innovating while their competitors were, and that left them on the verge of bankruptcy. Sorry, I was expecting presenter view here, and let me see here. 1 second. Oh, not going to happen. Okay. All right. Can you get it by chance? Okay. So what I want to share with you today is what I call the perfect aim method. And it's really about reimagining the way that we think about goal setting. And it starts with our core. I'm going to share with you this life coachy definition. I'm sure I'm going to lose half the room with this. But perfect aim, this is really what it is, a breakthrough goal setting technology that bridges the gap between our metaphysical intention, the experiential, and the physical manifestation of those intentions, the form, harnessing the true power and creative energy of the human spirit. I know I just lost half the room. But what I mean here is that when you think about a traditional goal, and we just think about it in our personal life for a second, and we're coming up on 2023, so I'm sure some of you will be setting some New Year's resolutions. Oftentimes what we think about is, I'm gonna lose 10 pounds, or maybe I'm gonna get that promotion, or maybe I wanna make a certain amount, or get out of debt, or something like that. And what I want you to consider is that that's not really what you're after. We don't really care about the number on the scale or the number in our bank account. What we care about is the experience that we believe that will provide. So perfect aim is about tapping into the experience that we're really after, both in our own life and in business. Apple was an innovative company that was designed to bring products to people they didn't even know that they needed. They were focused on profit maximization. And we got to shift that. That risks getting the wrong target and the wrong focus. So before I jump into that, I want to share with you how Perfect Aim came about. And hopefully this is the most interesting part of the presentation today. As Tom mentioned, I was a drill sergeant, and because I knew that you probably wouldn't believe me, I brought some evidence. So that is me in the funny hat in the middle in front of my platoon. This is in 2009 in Fort Knox, Kentucky. And if that's not enough, it was a different time in my life. You can laugh. I learned to smile again. This is one of my soldiers in 2003 on a mobilization. But back to why I'm bringing this up. So this concept of perfect aim starts with my experience as a drill sergeant. So this picture again is in 2009, Fort Knox, Kentucky. I'm 27 years old, 10 years into my Army career. Hard to believe I'm now almost 24 years in. And I was a new drill sergeant, pretty fresh out of drill sergeant school, and I'm waiting for my first basic training platoon, which are these soldiers here. And although, of course, as a drill sergeant, I would never show this, I was pretty nervous. Not so nervous about the training part, but nervous about the weight of the responsibility and duty that I had to these 60 soldiers. They come from all parts of the country. They're 17, 18, babies like I was when I joined the military. And not only is it my job to prepare them for their military career, to be successful as a soldier. But also this is 2009. Iraq and Afghanistan are still happening. There's hundreds of thousands of troops deployed across the world, and some of these very soldiers would end up in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so it's my job to ensure that they had the skills and confidence to survive in combat, and also to protect their fellow soldiers that they would be going to serve alongside with in 9 weeks. 9 weeks. So one of the very first most important milestones that happen in basic training is rifle marksmanship. In order to graduate basic training to become a soldier, you have to learn to use your weapon, and you have to qualify on that weapon. So while I was waiting for them to get there, I started to do some research on how do I train them to be the best possible marksman that I can. And I had been in the Army for 10 years. I knew my way around the M16, but I was a mediocre shooter, and when I had the weight of training 60 soldiers that had never fired, most of them, I wanted to know, how do the best people do it? And I came across a slideshow from the U.S. Army Marksmanship School. And the U.S. Army Marksmanship School, unrelated to basic training, surprisingly, or not, they train the very best snipers in the world. They train Olympians. And what I found absolutely blew my mind. I learned that my entire career in the Army, the way I've been trained and taught, was the wrong way. The Army teaches 4 fundamentals of marksmanship. U.S. Army Marksmanship School said there's only 2 that are important, and one of them is the most important. So 2, trigger squeeze, having a smooth trigger squeeze. The second thing, and most important, is how you aim, your sight picture. And what I learned is that if you change the way that you focus when you're aiming, that you actually tap into this superpower that even everyone in this room shares. So I want to show you what this looks like. These are less circular and square on this format, but who can tell me what's wrong with this picture on the left?
Dot doesn't look centered.
Dot's not centered, right? And what about the square?
It's skewed.
Yeah, it's crooked, right? So this same superpower that you all have, that we all share, and by the way, that is the slightest tweak that I could make on the slide. So our ability to automatically see when something is off center, you might not think about it as a superpower, but it absolutely is. And so what the U.S. Army Marksmanship School taught is that if we change the way that we focus when we're aiming, we can actually tap into this to achieve perfect aim. So let's look at how this works. This is what it looks like when you're aiming down an M16 weapon. And what you see here, the circle, is what we would call the rear sight post. So you're looking down a circle, and then this little black thing with the 3 points, that's the front sight post, okay? And what you see in picture 1 is how most people aim and the way I had been aiming for 10 years. The target in the background, the white box with the black silhouette, the target in the background is what we're focused on, okay? Now, when you do this, and if you've ever aimed a weapon, it's very shaky. So you have to scrunch down, use a bunch of energy, and try really hard, and then hope that it hits the target. And that's the way I've been aiming for years, and that's the way most soldiers are taught. On the second side, which is extremely counterintuitive, is the proper way to aim. So when we focus on the front sight post, you can see that the front sight post is in focus, and the target is blurry. When we focus on that front sight post, it taps into that same superpower that I was talking about, that we can see when a frame is slightly off center. And so you achieve perfect aim. But you have to trust that you're going to hit the target. It is very weird when you're like letting the target be blurry to focus on the front sight post because you're trying to hit the target. So with this information, we spent the first 3 weeks of basic training, and all we focused on, amongst a few other things, like push-ups and such, all we focused on was training this. I actually gave my privates this slideshow because it was so counterintuitive. I knew I needed to enroll them in why we were going to do this. All we focused on was focus on the front sight post, Smooth trigger squeeze. We get to qualification day, and qualification day, it's pretty wild. It's 50, you have targets dispersed between 50 and 300 meters. They pop up randomly, and you're in a timed event with different positions, and it's a big day. They're all nervous, because if they don't hit it, then they can't become a soldier. So by employing this model, which was different than the other platoons that we were competing with, and different than what I had always been trained, not only did our soldiers qualify as marksmen, but we achieved 99% first time go, which probably doesn't mean anything to anyone that's not a drill sergeant or in the Army here, or military. But 99% first time go meant that we set records for Fort Knox basic training platoons in achieving first time go. Fort Knox, an institution that has had thousands of basic training platoons go through. So simply by shifting the way that we focused, we became some of the best marksmen for a Army basic training platoon in history. And for me, who was kind of a mediocre shooter, I went from, mostly qualifying to hitting 40 out of 40 targets and being an expert marksman. So you might be asking yourself, well, what does this have to do with business? What does this have to do with goal setting? Well, about the same time, I was completing an executive leadership training program, and I was thinking a lot about business strategy. I was thinking about individual performance. And I started to realize that there was a real parallel between the way that we approach goals in business and in life and what I had just learned here about perfect aim. Most of us, when we set goals, we hold really, really tight to some specific target out in the future. And if we don't meet it, or if we do, we relate to ourselves as failing. So we're really holding on to some kind of target, and not only might we not hit the real target that we're after, but we're often not as effective at going after it. Anybody experienced that in goal setting? Have you ever got to a goal and you met it and you worked really hard to get it, but then you realize at the end of it that, wow, I don't even have what I actually was after, and so now I'm on to the next goal. Right? So I started to realize we need to really rethink the way that we think about goal setting, and we got to let the target be a little blurrier and really bring that focus and clarity closer in. So I want to share with you a quick story of one of my favorite clients and one of the most brilliant business owners that I've ever worked with, where we applied perfect aim to their business and completely shifted its trajectory. So the company is a company named Carrot. You may not have heard about it, but they have basically created what is called a technical interviewing cloud. Essentially, they help large tech companies who need to hire top engineering talent. They have created a way to better and more predictively and more fairly conduct the first and second round interviews for technical talent. So this is the founders, Mo and Jeff. This is from an article in the fall of 21 where they announced their Series C round and now have achieved a $1.1 billion valuation, which is absolutely mind-blowing, especially given the fact that I met them in 2014, and at the time Mo was a senior director at Microsoft who had an idea, and Jeff was the chief of staff for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And just to give you a sense of these two, Mo is by far the most brilliant business leader I've ever met. He was a Wharton MBA, he's a McKinsey consultant, and if that wasn't enough, between his undergrad and his graduate degree, he'd already started a company and sold it. So now he's a senior director at Microsoft. He was working on Xbox, did a lot of great work there, has a concept for this startup. He's decided that him and his friend are going to leave and do this thing. And they were very early. And so we have our first conversation. And naturally, because he's a brilliant business leader, he has a plan. I'm like, so, what are you thinking about? Where do you want this thing to be a year from today? And he had, of course, a brilliant answer to that, which was, we want to achieve product market fit. And we think we need to get to about 100,000 in revenue in order to raise our first round of funding. Sounds good. But applying perfect aim, I wanted to take a step back. I wanted to make sure that he really had the right target and the right focus. So I asked him some simple question, which is, if we take a step all the way back, what is this company really about? What is its core value that it's going to provide? What is its core purpose? Because we got to go all the way down to make sure that we're aiming in the right direction. And so we got to some version of, it was fuzzy, it's not exactly what the purpose is today, but it was good enough, which was to get the right people in the right job. And so I said, great, so if you were fulfilling on that purpose, where would you be in 5 years? And he said something, 20 million in revenue, something like that. Wasn't really concerned about that because we don't really know what's going to happen in 5 years. That can be blurry. Then I said, great, in order to be on track for that in 5 years, where would you need to be in 2 years? Great, and then where would you need to be 1 year from today? And so the goal that started out as product market fit and 100,000 in revenue turned into 3 to 5 strategic early customers and $1 million in revenue. Now, we didn't 10x his goal because that is great, let's just 10x a goal, because I don't think there's a lot of power in that, and it burns you out over time. But we really looked at what it could be and then created it from that place. And so 1 year later, and in that conversation, it completely shifted the trajectory of where they were focused and what target they were after. 1 year later, they hit the $1 million in revenue. They had 3 to 5 outstanding strategic early partners, one of which ended up becoming a strategic advisor on his board and has helped him grow the company to where it is today. And they raised their first round of funding within 14 months, $2 million on a $12 million valuation, and have continued to grow through there. So that is the power of perfect aim, the power of having the right strategy. If we aren't starting in the right place or aiming in the right place, we can have the best execution in the world, but we might not end up in the right place. So now let's talk a little bit about how do we apply this to your business. I want to leave you with something actionable. I told you I wasn't as good of a speaker as Cujo, but I hope I leave you with something that's actionable, okay? So how do we apply this to your business, to your life? And again, I hope that when you think about goals the rest of your life, you think about it differently. But before I dive into how to do it, I want to tell you how to know you're not doing it, okay? This is not the world's greatest slide, but it's an outstanding distinction. So don't read it too much. What it's saying here is the top 4 signs that you're off target, how you know that you're doing the old way, all right? There's pretty much 4 ways that it shows up. Bottom left is where you're not setting goals at all. I doubt that's the issue with most of the folks in here, although I've been there myself in business where I just want to bury my head in the sand. Bottom right is about what I call the perfectionist procrastinator in us. We're focused on small problems and fixing fears. So we might be, this will show up, maybe you're noticing, these are more personal examples, get out of debt, lose 10 pounds. But in our business, it's like focused on the font of the second page of the website stuff. Okay? Now, the top 2, I think, are the most common that you'll run into as a business owner or leadership team. Top right is about avoiding failure. So this is when we're using goals as a measuring stick for our value or worth. And so what happens when we do that is that we set goals that we know we can achieve. And if you leave with nothing today, I hope that you leave with the knowledge that a goal is always and only a tool to move you from where you are to where you want to go. That's it. It's not a measure of your value or worth. The way that this shows up, you'll hear people saying things like, well, we did 5% last year, let's do 7% this year. It's incremental and unrelated to why the company exists or what the real intention is there. Does that make sense? You've heard that before? You've said that before, maybe? All right. So top left, I think, is maybe the worst case, and it's become quite popular. I like Grant Cardone and 10X, but I think some people misconstrue what he's really meaning. So the top left is about always going bigger, better, and faster as a strategy. In the example with John Scully, he was about profit maximization and revenue growth, which is a bigger, better, faster mindset, but it was off target. So the way that this will show up when you're talking about setting goals, it's like we have a goal, but let's 10x it. Let's always make it bigger, better, faster. Let's aim for the moon and land amongst the stars. And all I want you to consider is these are examples that you're in a traditional goal-setting mindset, and it risks having the wrong target and the wrong focus for your life or your business. All right. So, the anatomy of a goal with perfect aim. Here's one of the key distinctions. All of the ways that we normally think about goals is that we have just the form of a goal. So, increase sales by 20%. Lose weight, get a new job, get that promotion, whatever. A perfect aim goal always has two elements. And really, your goals always have two elements. We just usually haven't been stating it. The one that we're most familiar with is the measure. This is the what, the outcome, the physical form of our goal. So this is the sales number. This is the launching the new product. This is the acquiring a new customer. But the power of your goals and the precision of the goals will be much more different if you start with what is the actual intent? What's the objective? This is the part where it's a little fuzzier, which is why most of us avoid it. We avoid it because we can't control this part. Okay? So two parts of the goal: objective, the why, the intent, the experiential, the metaphysical. All right. So let's look at an example real quick, and then I'm gonna give you the opportunity to just walk through this a little bit, maybe even your own business, your own life. So on the left, this is a classic goal: increase sales by 20% in 2022. I want you to consider this is what a perfect aim goal would look like. One, we're starting with the real intentions that we have. To create deeper connection and product market fit with our best customers. Because as you know, there's a lot of ways that we could grow sales to 20%, by 20%, and not be doing our business a good service. And then the second part is what would be the measure indicative of that intention or objective? So to grow revenue to 250 or more by December 31st, 2023. So, question real quick, when you see the two side by side, what do you notice? What is your observation?
There's a lot more information and meaning on the right.
Absolutely. A lot more observation, information and meaning. Yep, yeah.
Can you turn to the why, introduce everybody to what that goal is, our realistic?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's what I'm talking about, and there's two pieces I just want to highlight, and y'all are pointing them out perfectly. Number one is, the one on the right is far more precise. I can't say this enough. You know, we might kind of know what we're talking about to increase sales by 20%. We might have it implied that, yes, we want it to be with our best customers, we want to create deeper connection, we want to do a better job. But the larger your organization gets, the more muddled that gets. And so if we're just focused on 20% sales revenue or revenue growth, but we're doing that with the wrong customers or at the expense of our best customers, we're not winning. The second thing is, imagine quarter after quarter or year after year, you're going to your team or you're going to yourself and you're reading the one on the left. Is that inspiring to you? Does that bring forward your happiest self and your most powerful self to go after that year after year after year? Absolutely not. So one of the things that Perfect Aim does is it taps into that superpower in your people. When we change the way that we focus, we tap into a deeper level of power. All right, so how do we apply this to your business? Just gonna walk you through the quick framework that we talked about with Mo and Jeff and Kara. So one of the most important things to uncover the right target is that you gotta start with the core for your business. And some of you might think that sounds fluffy, But what we're talking about is the core value that your business provides. And the moment that you stop delivering on the core value that your business provides is the moment you start to die. Because when you are fulfilling on that core value, that's why customers give you money, is for the core value that you provide. When you stop doing that, you start providing less value. When you start providing less value, you start receiving less value. So what we got to get connected to, and this is my favorite question, not what's your vision and mission, but the simple question, why does our business exist? Because what's going to drive is, what is that core purpose? What is the core reason for existence? You don't have to get this perfect. This can be fuzzy. Don't spend many hours. You'll get to it pretty effectively, all right? So from that place, that note lets us know that we're setting off on the right target, and now we're going to dial in the focus. So these are a series of very simple questions. If you were fulfilling on that core purpose, where would you be in 5 years? And one of the things that you'll notice with that very question, we're already taking out of it our mindset, our fears, our limiting beliefs about what is or isn't possible. We're simply looking at what is the core purpose of this business and where would it be in 5 years? Now again, the answer to that question is not that important. What we're really trying to do is get the direction now. So we'll go to the next question. If you were on track for that 5 year, where would you be in 2 years? It's a little more important, but still not that important. We don't know what's going to happen in 2 years. The next question is really important. If we were on track for that in 2 years, where would we be in 1 year? So now we're starting to clarify that focus. We're starting to get that front sight post. And we're going to work to clarify that a bit more. The 1 year is the most important goal. It's far enough out in the future that we can do something big, but it's close enough that it can be actionable. Now the next piece is really about honing the focus. And plenty of business leaders will fight me on this. I can't possibly fit in what I got to do this year into 3 priorities. But I want to challenge you to consider that the better you're able to focus, the more powerful you will be about going after that. And what I'm going to ask you is, what are the top 3 priorities that would have you achieve that 1 year goal? It requires a little bit of letting go of control, a little bit of trusting yourself and your people that they'll figure out the way to do the things that they need to do. It's a little bit like trusting that if you focus on the front sight post, let the target be blurry, that is actually the way to being more effective. You'll notice in the priorities there's an objective and a measure, because we want to be really precise with what these priorities are so that we are spending our focus on the things that are going to help us hit that target. And then the very last piece here, and I'm going to open it up for some questions. The closer in we get, the more focused we want to be. And ultimately, we want to get to a place where we're just focused on 90 days, our 90-day objectives that lead to that business priority. So we're going to take each one of those business priorities and create its own plan or project. And the first place we're going to start with that is, what is the target by end of Q4, into Q3, into Q2, into Q1? And ultimately, what we're going to focus on is, what do we got to do in the next 90 days? That's how you achieve perfect aim in your business. And by the way, you can totally apply this to your life as well. But that's how you achieve perfect aim. We're focused on that Q1, that's like the front side post, and we're starting to let the rest be blurry. So with that, I want to turn it over to some questions. I have a quote that I want to leave you with once we're done with the questions. But what do y'all got? Yeah.
How do you deal with the concept of time in the sense that, like, you know, right now it's November, let's say it's like June and we're having this discussion. The perfectionist in me says, holy cow, I'm going to really hit this, you know, come December, I'm going to knock out a plan to really do this. There's a tendency to kind of connect goals to artificial, you know, time. How do you get over that? You know, just your thoughts on that. Do you understand the question?
Absolutely, yes. And the perfectionist in me, when I first started going into this, so sorry, the question was, you know, you're in June and you're like, oh, I really need to get this done, but, you know, we should wait until the end of December basically to start fresh for a new year, right?
Yeah.
So don't let that stop you. You've got to have a plan. And usually, so, you know, if we were at, for example, this year, you know, I wouldn't start with, you know, setting goals for the end of the year. I would just look at, okay, we're at, you know, November, or even if we're in June, I'd look at an 18-month timeline. I err on the side of a longer timeline than a shorter timeline. So at least 12, maybe 18 months is where I would narrow in on that 1-year goal. Okay?
Appreciate it.
Cool. All right. Who else? Yeah.
How do you deal with uncertainty in this model? What I'm referring is that in today's environment, when everything is kind of uncertain and changes happen and things move around very quickly, as we all know, in manufacturing, for example, the constraints in supply chain is a real pain, like everybody probably knows. How do you deal with the kind of flexibility in this type of model? How, in your view, businesses can kind of pilot maybe some directions and then pivot if something doesn't work? So what are kind of like ways to deal with uncertainty?
Yeah. It's an excellent question, and it's what Perfect Aim is ultimately about. I think it's the main problem with the traditional way that we think about goal setting, because we set a rigid goal that really limits the possible ways that we can achieve that goal. And then we hold rigidly to achieving that goal, even if the conditions change. So what Perfect Aim is about, it's about remembering that a goal is not a measure of even our business's failure or worth. It's a tool to move us from where we are to where we want to go. So if conditions change, we can change the focus. But one of the key pieces here, and it's an easy concept to talk about, harder to put in practice, is how do we set an objective, the true experience that we're after, not some rigid number like, you know, increase manufacturing efficiency from this to that, or increase lead time or customer delivery, and then you have a challenge, right? The objective there might be instead to create the best possible customer experience that we can. And then the measure of that is, you know, to improve as much as we can by a certain date, given the current constraints. The point is that it moves you toward where you want to go more effectively rather than holding on rigidly to some arbitrary goal. Yeah. Thanks for that question, it's fantastic. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
Just wondering your thoughts on this. I've had the opportunity to work in a couple organizations that do a great job of aligning the whole organization on the business's objectives. So when these things are established, if your organization is large enough that you're doing individual employee objective plans, make sure that all of those objectives that are set are directly in support of what the direction of the organization is. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, absolutely. You know, that's the power of driving this at an organization level, where you're ultimately what every single employee, every single seat, that their objectives are aligned with the overall objective. But that takes discipline and execution, which kind of goes back to that EOS framework. One of the ways that that's driven, sorry, I can't see you, but you keep moving in the way. That's hilarious. You're fine. One of the ways that we drive that, though, is by constant communication, by having objectives that are meaningful and that people can align with. And so it's a very important piece. Yeah. All right. Anything else? Here we got time for one more question. All right. Well, I'll leave you with.
If no one else has a question,
Yeah.
what's the number one problem that you see with goal setting? If you were to summarize it all, what do you run into the most is the number one issue with goal setting?
The number one problem I think with goal setting is that earlier slide that I had up is, it's a terrible slide, and I can send it to you so you can actually dig into it. But the way that we have been conditioned since we were children to think about goals and achievement. You know, I came to this because I was a major goal setter and achiever, and I got to a point in my life where I had achieved all the things I thought would make me happy, but I was not happy. And I knew that I wasn't going to get where I really wanted to be if I kept going about it the same way, which is we're just in a performance mindset. We're just trying to be better, do more, go faster. And what happens when we're in that mindset is that we might be focusing on the wrong things. We might be hitting the wrong targets. And worst of all, we're wasting a bunch of time, energy, and money when we're not on the right target. But what it requires is us to get out of these mindsets, like expanding our ego, feeling good about our goals, avoiding failure in our goals, focused on the things that don't really matter. And I think actually the quote that I want to leave you all with illustrates this. This is, you might have had too much Steve Jobs. Sorry for my Android people in the room, but I think he's pretty cool. So this is a quote I came across as I was preparing for today that illustrates how important focus and simplicity is. He said, that's been one of my mantras, focus and simplicity. Simple can be harder than complex. You have to work hard to get your thinking clean to make it simple, but it's worth it in the end because once you get there, you can move mountains. And that is, I think, making goals too complicated. We got to keep it simple. We got to keep it on the core of what we're really after and what our business is really after. So, thank you so much. And if you have any inquiries, let me know. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Rodney. Thank you so much for being here. Just a couple of housekeeping items here. Jason's going to come up.